Before anyone knew your name, God knew you. Before anyone saw what you could become, God saw you. Before you succeeded, before you failed, before you understood your strengths, before you discovered your weaknesses, God knew you. And that changes something. Because most people spend their entire lives trying to become someone worth knowing, someone worth loving, someone worth choosing, someone worth calling. But what if your value did not begin when you proved yourself? What if your story was already seen before you understood any of it? There is a man in the Bible whose story begins before he is even born. Most people remember him for his strength. Some remember his hair. Some remember Delilah. Some remember the moment he lost everything. But Samson's story did not begin with his failure. It did not begin with his strength. It began before his birth. Israel was again under oppression. The Philistines had power over them. And somewhere in that difficult season lived a woman who could not have children. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to her. And before Samson had taken a breath, before he had opened his eyes, before he had made a single decision, there was already a word over his life. He would be set apart. He would begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines. Think about that. Samson had not achieved anything. He had not proven courage. He had not defeated anyone. He had not shown strength. He had done nothing. He had not even been born. And yet God already knew what his life could carry. That is where this message begins. Not with what you have done, with the fact that God knows you. And maybe that is difficult for you to believe, because you know yourself too well. You know the thoughts nobody hears. You know the decisions nobody saw. You know the things you regret. You know where you are inconsistent. You know how often you doubt. You know how many times you promised yourself you would change and then went back. And sometimes the more you know yourself, the harder it becomes to believe that God could look at you and still see purpose. But God is not discovering you. He is not learning who you are as your life unfolds. He does not suddenly look at one of your failures and say, "I did not expect that." God knows you completely. And still, you are here. That does not mean everything you do is approved. It does not mean every decision is part of some perfect plan. It means your weakness is not hidden from God, and your existence is not an accident to Him. Samson's parents were given instructions about his life before Samson could understand any of them. He would be set apart from birth. His life would carry responsibility. And eventually, something extraordinary began to happen. The Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him. Strength appeared. Unusual strength. The kind of strength that would make Samson unforgettable. But here is the first danger in his story. A gift can appear before maturity does. Think about that. You can be talented before you are disciplined. You can be gifted before you are wise. You can have opportunity before you understand responsibility. You can carry something powerful and still not know how to carry yourself. And Samson had extraordinary strength. But strength was not the same thing as maturity. This is where his story becomes uncomfortable. Because sometimes we assume that if God has given someone something special, that person must also be spiritually mature. Not necessarily. A gift is not character. Talent is not wisdom. Opportunity is not readiness. And being used by God does not mean there are no areas inside you that need to change. Samson grew. His strength became obvious. But so did something else. He was impulsive. He wanted what he wanted. He was drawn toward things that repeatedly placed him near danger. And this matters because the biggest threat to Samson's calling was not that he lacked power. He had plenty of power. The threat was that he did not always know what to do with desire. That is a different kind of weakness. You can be strong in public and weak in private. You can appear powerful while having an area of your life you continually refuse to confront. You can win battles that everyone sees and still lose battles nobody knows you are fighting. And Samson is proof that strength in one area does not protect you from weakness in another. But before we get to his fall, we need to understand something deeper. God knew this man before he was born. God knew his potential. God knew his calling. And God also knew the kind of man Samson would become. That means Samson's story is not the story of God accidentally choosing the wrong person. It is the story of a person carrying something meaningful while still possessing freedom, weakness, appetite, pride, and responsibility. That should make us think differently about ourselves. Because maybe you have been waiting to become perfect before you believe your life can matter. Maybe you think God can only use the version of you that never struggles, the version that never hesitates, the version that has already figured everything out. But that person does not exist. God knows the real you, not the image, not the version you present to everyone else. The real one. And the real you is still responsible for what you do with what you have been given. That is where calling becomes serious. Because being known by God is comforting, but it is also confronting. If God knows you, then He knows what you are capable of becoming. And He also knows where you keep compromising. He knows the area you keep excusing. He knows the pattern you call harmless. He knows the thing you keep telling yourself you can control. Samson kept moving toward things that should have made him more careful. But instead of becoming more careful, he often became more confident. And confidence can become dangerous when past victories convince you that consequences will never reach you. Samson had defeated enemies, escaped impossible situations, demonstrated strength again and again. And maybe, somewhere along the way, he began to believe that he could always get out. That is one of the most dangerous beliefs a strong person can develop. I can handle it. I know when to stop. I will not go too far. This will not control me. I have escaped before. And maybe that is where some people are right now. Not destroyed, not broken, not in crisis. Just playing near something that has the potential to cost much more than they think. The problem is not always that you do not know better. Sometimes you know exactly what the danger is. You just believe you are stronger than it. Samson's story keeps showing us this tension. A man chosen before birth. A man given extraordinary strength. A man carrying purpose. And a man who still had to make choices every day. That is important. Calling does not cancel responsibility. God knowing you does not mean your choices become meaningless. Purpose is not permission to live carelessly. In fact, the more you carry, the more carefully you may need to live. Because there are things in your life worth protecting. And Samson did not lose everything in one moment. That is the part people often miss. We remember Delilah as though she suddenly appeared and destroyed a perfect man. But Delilah was not the beginning. There was already a pattern of desire, a pattern of moving close to danger, a pattern of trusting his strength more than his boundaries. And patterns matter, because most destruction does not announce itself. It grows. A compromise becomes normal, then another, until eventually, the thing you once controlled begins controlling you. But even here, the message is not that Samson was forgotten by God. It is the opposite. God knew him completely. And this is where the story gets difficult. Because sometimes being known by God does not mean being protected from every consequence of your choices. There are moments when love allows truth to become painful. There are consequences that teach what warnings could not. And Samson eventually reached that point. Then came Delilah. But again, do not make the mistake of thinking the story is about one woman. The deeper issue was that Samson had become comfortable living close to the edge. Delilah kept asking, "Where does your strength come from? How can you be defeated?" And Samson played with the question. He lied. He teased the truth. He moved closer, then closer, then closer again. That is how dangerous compromise often works. Not with one giant leap, with proximity. You do not decide one day to destroy your life. You just keep moving one step closer to something you should have walked away from. You keep telling yourself there is time. You keep trusting yourself. You keep assuming you will know when it is too much. And then one day you discover that the line you promised you would never cross is behind you. Samson finally told Delilah the truth. His hair was connected to the vow that marked him as set apart. And while he slept, his hair was cut. Then the Philistines came. And there is one sentence in this story that should make anyone stop. Samson woke and thought he would go out as before. As before. That is the danger. He expected yesterday's strength to cover today's compromise. He assumed nothing had really changed. He believed he could rise again exactly like all the other times. But this time was different. His strength was gone, and he did not realize it at first. That is terrifying. Because sometimes the most dangerous spiritual decline is the one you do not immediately feel. You can lose sensitivity gradually, lose discipline gradually, lose focus gradually, and still wake up thinking, I am fine. I can handle it. Nothing has changed. But something has changed. And eventually, the consequences reveal it. The Philistines seized Samson. They blinded him. They bound him. The man known for strength became a prisoner. The man who could tear through enemies now depended on others to move. And imagine what that must have done inside him. For years, strength had been part of how people knew him. Now it was gone. Vision gone. Freedom gone. Reputation broken. Calling seemingly ruined. And maybe this is where the story becomes deeply personal. Because some people know what it is like to lose the thing they thought defined them. Maybe not physical strength. Maybe it was success, money, beauty, position, a relationship, a career, a reputation. And once it disappeared, you did not know who you were anymore. But remember where Samson's story began. Before strength, before battles, before failure. God knew him. That means his identity was never supposed to rest entirely on the gift. And neither is yours. You are more than what you produce, more than what you can do, more than the thing people praise you for, more than your strongest season, and more than your weakest one. If your identity only survives while you are winning, then you do not really know who you are yet. Samson had to learn that in the darkest possible place, blind, bound, humiliated, grinding grain for the people who defeated him. The great strong man reduced to something almost unrecognizable, but then Scripture gives us one quiet detail. His hair began to grow again. That is such a small sentence. But it matters, because while everyone else saw a defeated man, something was beginning again, slowly, quietly. No crowd celebrating, no immediate miracle, just growth. And sometimes that is how restoration starts. Not with thunder, not with everyone seeing it, not with everything suddenly returning, with something small beginning again, a prayer, a decision, a boundary, a return to discipline, a moment of honesty, a willingness to stop pretending. And maybe that is where you are. You do not feel strong. You do not feel impressive. You do not feel like the person you once were. Maybe you are living with consequences. Maybe you are embarrassed by what happened. Maybe you think you wasted what God gave you. But God knows you. He knew you before the gift. He knew you before the failure. He knows you now. And being known by God means you do not have to hide from Him. That is one of the strangest things we do. We hide spiritually from the one who already knows everything. We pray carefully. We choose safe words. We pretend we are less angry than we are, less afraid, less ashamed, less confused, but God already knows. So what if you stopped performing? What if you spoke honestly? God, I wasted something. God, I keep going back to this. God, I am afraid. God, I do not know how to become who I thought I would be. God, I feel like I failed. That kind of honesty is not weakness. It is the beginning of relationship. Because you cannot be fully known while constantly pretending. Samson reached the point where strength could no longer save him, and maybe that is exactly where he finally understood dependence. At the end of his story, he prayed, not a performance, not a boast, a prayer. Remember me, strengthen me once more. There is something deeply human in that. The man who had relied so heavily on his own strength now asks God for strength, once more. And God answered. This does not erase everything Samson did. It does not undo the pain. It does not turn every decision into something good. But it shows us something important. Failure was not the only thing God knew about Samson. God knew the whole story. And your worst chapter is not the only thing God knows about you either. Maybe you think God knows you and that terrifies you. Because if He really knows you, then He knows everything. Yes, He does. But He also knows what you do not know yet. He knows what you can become if you stop running. He knows what healing can produce. He knows what maturity can look like after failure. He knows what happens if you finally take seriously the area you have been ignoring. He knows the parts of you that have not been developed yet. That is why God knows you is not only comforting, it is an invitation to stop hiding, an invitation to grow, an invitation to take responsibility for what you carry, an invitation to protect what matters, an invitation to stop playing with things that can destroy what God has placed in your life. You were not created to spend your entire life proving that you deserve to exist. You were not created to become a copy of everyone around you. And you were not created to waste your life pretending your weaknesses are not real. God knows you. And if He knows you, then you can face yourself honestly. You can stop being shocked that you have weaknesses. You can stop believing that weakness means you have no purpose. And you can stop using purpose as an excuse to ignore weakness. Both truths can exist at the same time. You can be called and still need growth. You can be gifted and still need discipline. You can be loved and still need correction. You can have purpose and still make choices that matter. That is Samson. And maybe that is you. There may be something in your life that God has placed there for a reason. A gift, a responsibility, a voice, an opportunity, a family, a capacity to lead, a heart for people, a mind that sees what others miss. Do not treat lightly what you have been given, and do not assume that because you have survived careless choices before, you will always escape the consequences. Protect your life. Protect your character. Protect your relationship with God. Protect the parts of you that need to remain sensitive, because your greatest strength cannot save you from a weakness you refuse to confront. But also remember this: your weakness does not surprise God. Your history does not surprise God. Your questions do not surprise God. Before you were born, God knew you, and He knows you now. Not the version you wish you were. You, the one listening right now, with your past, with your fears, with your unfinished growth, with your strengths, with your blind spots, with your potential, with your responsibility. God knows you. And perhaps the question is no longer whether God knows who you are. The question is whether you are willing to become honest about who you are becoming. Because Samson's tragedy was not that he had no calling. He had one. It was not that he had no gift, he had an extraordinary one. The tragedy was that having something great did not automatically teach him how to protect it. Do not make the same mistake. Do not spend your life admiring what God gave you while ignoring what can destroy it. Do not wait until something is lost before you become serious about your boundaries. And if you already have lost something, do not assume God has stopped seeing you. Samson's hair grew again, his prayer returned, and in his final moment, he stopped relying only on himself. Maybe your next season does not begin with proving how strong you are. Maybe it begins with admitting where you are weak. Maybe it begins with a prayer. God, you know me. You know where I am strong. You know where I keep falling. You know what I am afraid to face. You knew me before I was born, so help me become someone who can carry well what you have placed in my life. That is a prayer worth praying. And if this message spoke to you, subscribe to Made for More. This channel is for people who want to grow stronger in faith, understand what God is doing in their lives, and become more intentional about the person they are becoming. You do not have to hide from God. You do not have to impress Him. You do not have to pretend. Before you were born, God knew you, and He knows you still.